The fourth annual Jazz Festival was to be held in the main street of Morpeth. Organisers say they applied last year to have Swan Street closed, but it was rejected by council 2 weeks ago. Trevor Richards says there is not enough time now to change the venue. It means cancellation of a special remembrance march to mark last year's festival's steam train disaster, a host of bands, stalls and an estimated 25,000 visitors.
We feel that over the years we've lacked support from Maitland City Council, both financially and also from a moral point of view, and this is just, I guess, the straw that broke the camel's back. And so from now on, our committee is looking very seriously at not bothering to run any of the festivals that we've had at Morpeth in the past.
Previous jazz, grammar and corn festivals have attracted hundreds of thousands of visitors to Morpeth and raised thousands of dollars for local groups. But according to Maitland Mayor Ray Fairweather, Morpeth residents did not want the main street closed, and he has 270 signatures to prove it.
I know that council will be extremely disappointed if the Jazz Festival don't go ahead. We are of the opinion that the Jazz Festival can go ahead. There are areas in Morpeth that would accommodate a Jazz Festival, so I don't agree that it has to be really cancelled.
He says the application to close Swan Street was not received until January this year, and he refuted claims that council is opposed to tourism.
The reason we don't support a lot of areas where functions in Maitland itself is because we just don't have the finance, and we have to be very careful how we spend the ratepayers' dollar. So as much as we'd like to, it's just not possible.
Brett Jones is one of many Seahampton residents who left last night's public meeting dissatisfied.
The major questions of whether their blasting is doing damage to our homes was left unanswered.
Residents claim blasting that's been carried out in the area by Abbey Group contractors since December last year has caused hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage to their homes. The company and the Roads and Traffic Authority continue to deny any responsibility, but the residents are determined to continue fighting.
We've probably got two avenues. One is seeking legal advice, and the second one is going through our local state members, who's John Mills, and seeing whether we can get the New South Wales government involved in the issue. It won't just die away. Everyone's very determined to get at least some answer from Abbey Group and the RTA.
More than 100 blasts have been felt in the area over the last 5 months, but Abbey Group contractors insist all were within the limits set out by the State Pollution Control Commission. The SPCC today said it hadn't been aware of the extent of the problem, but following last night's report on NBN News, it will be launching an investigation into the situation. Up until now, it has been left up to the company itself to monitor vibrations caused by the blasting. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
It's this blast furnace slag quenching process, the cooling of waste material, which has been blamed for the hydrogen sulphide smell that is worrying residents. Last night, the large number of complaints prompted a State Pollution Control Inspector to investigate. It's the fourth time this week the SPCC has tried to locate the smell. Now its findings are official.
We served yesterday a notice on them to investigate, and to come back to us with an action plan and a timetable to implement that action plan to reduce, remove if possible, that H2S source in the community.
BHP said that no one was available to speak to us on camera about the matter or what the steelworks plans to do to prevent the overpowering stench of rotten eggs, a smell that residents as far away as New Lambton Heights say occurs around 4 days a week, is particularly bad in the evenings and during the night, and has got considerably worse in the past few months.
The quenching procedure has only changed recently to try and minimise odour, and when I say recently, I guess we're looking at the last couple of months, but that was aimed at minimising odour. The only thing I can say, it's weather conditions at the moment.
Those weather conditions include a lot of northeasterly winds and not much rain. The good news is the rotten smell may be just that.
Normally H2S at those levels isn't a long-term health problem.
But the bad news for BHP is it has only until July the 1st to figure out how to rectify the problem, or it could face action in the Land and Environment Court. And that's while it waits to hear if it is to face prosecution over the Steelworks Easter Monday accident, which saw raw coke oven fumes spew into the Newcastle air. Rebecca Skinner, NBN News.
Curry were without their point-scoring machine Phil Williams, sidelined with a serious knee injury, while the Tars trotted out their latest recruit, former Kiwi international and Newcastle Knights player James Goulding. And it was the Cheetahs who opened the scoring when fullback Paul Shealy ran towards the sideline, linking up with hard-charging prop Terry Stevenson, and he scored without too much trouble. Just before half-time, Curry hit back to give them some hope, and it was Daryl Johnson who picked up an intercept, and he really had the Tars defence stretched as he raced away, and it was only just in time that the cover picked him up. 2 play the balls later, the Bulldogs were in, as the ball went right out to the other wing, where Michael Hay was on the end of the movement, and it was 14-4 at the break. Curry bombed what looked like a certain try right after the interval, which would have got them back in the match. It was scrappy play as Mark Hanlon took to playing soccer, and the little kick-throughs nearly proved fruitful. In the 14th minute, Goulding proved his worth by barging over to give the Cheetahs a handy lead. And then the try of the day. Forward Anthony Shannon was able to stand an offload to Mark Hanlon, and he was able to slip the pass to Phil Brown. On to Ross Hanlon on the wing, back to brother Mark, who made a small break, and he found Paul Allardyce backing up. With pace to burn, Allardyce skipped away and he ran 35 metres to score and put the result beyond doubt.
This was the face of coal mining in the Hunter Valley at the turn of the century. And this is the face of coal mining today. It's the clean-cut look of an industry preparing to answer a 50% increase in demand from Japanese and European markets.
Whereas we're only the 7th biggest producer of coal in the world, we are number 1 in exports, and we believe we can probably increase that by 50% by the year 2005.
That will mean as many as 15 new mines and 1,000 new jobs for the Hunter Valley. The valley owes a third of its livelihood to coal and generates 3/4 of the state's power needs. As well, it exports 30 million tonnes of coal a year. Coal Week sets out to appease communities in the path of these giant open-cut footprints by highlighting the advances in environmental reconstruction and protection. These include the development of cleaner burning coals and the regeneration of open-cut areas.
You can take what is regarded as a waste product and supposed to be an environmentally bad thing and turn it back and turn it into good food production with good crops coming up.
I think it's very important for the industry to put forward the most positive face to its activities.
But it seems there'll be little room for sentiment in the industry. The state government is considering a $20,000 gratuity payment to the widows of miners killed on the job, in return for an assurance from their workmates that production would continue regardless of fatalities. Almost 120 years ago to the day, the Scone Railway Station was opened with the pomp and ceremony befitting the times. In that respect at least, not much had changed for its reopening today. The station was put on the State Rail Authority's closure list last year, and since then its platform has offered only cold comfort to train travellers. Scone Council took a lease on the building and sublet it to Barbie Palmer, who's found there's life in the old building yet.
Enormous amount of interest, the concept that they can actually sit in the warm in the winter with the fireplaces and keep cool in the summer and look at art.
Its walls are hung with the work of local artists. The old station master's rooms have been transformed into a cosy cafe. As far as State Rail's Chief Executive Ross Sayers is concerned, there should be more stations like it.
Generating a rental income on these stations really preserves them and gives a focal point for local community. Excellent move, and we wish to encourage it as much as we possibly can.
John Brown led the race for 17 laps before a slower car spun out, causing the race to be restarted. From the restart, it was Brown who again took control until another pile-up by the front runner saw everyone back on level terms. John Pine took over the lead and appeared to be in total control before he made an error, trying to overtake a slower car coming into turn 3, with only 4 laps remaining. Bob Brewer took full advantage of Pine's error and raced to the lead and the championship. At Lowlands Bowling Club today, the final of the Newcastle City Masters singles were played, and it was Charlestown's George Dawes who was successful. The bowls coordinator played superbly in the final against Waratah's Ken Bowick, and after a hard tussle towards the end, it was Dawes who was the winner, 31 shots to 24.
In Melbourne, police think a kidnapper dubbed Mr. Cruel may have abducted 13-year-old Carmen Chan from her Templestowe home on Saturday night. And Welsh golfer Ian Woosnam has won the US Masters Golf Championship by 1 stroke after an 11 under par 277.
Newcastle stamped their authority on the game early, with Jones setting up play, 5/8 Craig Higgins in the thick of the action, and Trevor Crowe was in devastating form as the cinnamon and green machine surged towards the try line. They were rewarded as former Winfield Cup players Brian Quinton and Troy Clark sent Glenn Frendo over in the corner for the first of 3 tries. Skipper Jones was involved in the next try, and it was the find of the Carnival Tony Price who was instrumental in the finishing of the movement. Newcastle continued to pressure the Riverina defence, and it was Clark who scored a good solo try, and the boys from the Castle led 16-0. After the break, Riverina started to get their act together, and halfback Bland made a great dash to put the Southerners back in business. Again, they hammered the Newcastle line, and it was Burgess who finished off the sustained attack, and Riverina trailed by 6. But Newcastle rallied under a flood of penalties against them to hang on and take the Country League Championship 16 points to 10. It's the ultra test of human endurance in the land, a mammoth 3.8 kilometre swim, followed by 180 kilometres of pure slog on your bike, and to top it off a little jog of 42.2 kilometres or a full marathon. 583 competitors greeted the starter in what was going to be 8.5 hours out on the track for some, while others would finish in the dark around 15 hours after the first chilly steps into the water. Sydney's Tony Unicum was the first swimmer to leave the water in a tremendous time of 48 minutes and 48 seconds, but that was to be his only glory for the day as he later retired from the race. Settling into a groove on the very demanding cycle leg, 5 riders broke away from the rest of the triathletes and they were able to maintain that gap on the struggling bunch for most of the 180 Ks. Drama also in the cycle leg as 5 cyclists were later disqualified for drafting. At the final changeover, it was Germany's Dirk Aschbonnet who led Pauli Kayuri by 44 seconds, and the ultra triathlon was set for a stunning conclusion. And the man that made the event his own was Kayuri, who ran a sensational marathon leg in the time of 2 hours 47.55 minutes, giving him a winning margin of 9 minutes in the unbelievable time of 8 hours 22.40 minutes. Second was Aschbonnet, and third was another overseas competitor, American Ken Glar. The ladies was an All-Australian quinella, with Jan Wanklin winning from Louise Bonham in the time of 9 hours 34.06 minutes. There's real concern at the Broadmeadow Castle with the way in which the Knights are letting teams off the hook. Against Penrith, the Knights had the game in their keeping, and then they bombed a win against the Tigers with some undisciplined play. Yesterday, they were outplayed by the plucky Roosters, and to salvage a point from an ordinary performance was a bonus.
The attack wasn't there. Whenever we tried to do something, it fell down. We dropped passes with the line open, and of course that's always very disappointing. But the good side of it was, of course, our defence. It stood the test, and East really put it to the test. But yeah, there's a few things to be looked at.
That defence was the cause of concern to many as the Roosters open up the Knights on numerous occasions.
Full credit to East on their game on the day, and there were occasions when normally our guys would have held the opposition in tackles, and they did manage to get away, and that is also an area that's got to be addressed this week, because we can't afford to have that happen again.
But the fact remains that the Knights are still undefeated. Maybe the players and the coaching staff are trying too hard to overcome problem areas.
Maybe after, as I said, of the lacklustre performance at some stage yesterday, probably be a few people might ask the exact opposite. Are they trying hard enough? But as I said, I don't really know what the problem is, but it's going to be very, very thoroughly addressed this week with a view to turning it around.
To complicate matters further, second rower David Boyd is currently before the New South Wales Rugby League judiciary after being reported for this tackle on Paul Vaughton early in the game.
Obviously there's an area of concern there because the tackle is high, but when you slow the tape down you can see that the point of impact is across the chest, so we'll just hope that the judiciary shares our point of view.
Les Thornborough is founding president of Australia Now, a group of people in small business who hope solidarity and support will inject fresh enthusiasm into Gosford's and ultimately Australia's private sector.
We really do think that the only way to reduce unemployment is to have a strong small business sector. I think it's been proven that big companies discard people because technology comes in and employment gets pushed out the door. Small business proprietors and business people are the ones that will employ Australia's future.
Australia Now will become a cross between a lobby group, a support group, a networking framework and a source of information.
I think the most important thing we can do as Australia Now is to educate the people and inform the people of what is actually happening out there. We intend to have our own groups that can educate people on ways of running their business better and more efficiently, to raise a level of professionalism of small business people as a whole.
12 months in the planning, the organisation is starting with a bang. A dinner at Gosford Golf Club tonight will launch this glossy newsletter, 12 pages outlining the group's philosophy and aims. Using the experience and expertise of its own members, it will also set up a troubleshooting hit squad, which will offer free advice and support to its membership.
And a lot of the small business people have a lot of initiative, and it's been sucked out of them by bad management from the government.
The group is using Gosford as a starting point, but its mission is Australia-wide. Its hoped expansion will, in the long run, make Australia now a force to be reckoned with. It's a small group with big plans, but it remains to be seen whether the tough economic times are enough to make small businesses not only sit up and take notice, but get involved and make Australia now a success. Alison Peters for NBN News.
The Cannons and the Falcons have met on 23 previous occasions, and the count is in favour of the capital kids 14-9. But on the 6th of April last year, it was one for the Falcons in dramatic circumstances.
Smythe, 11 seconds, back to Kenny, intercepted by James Bullock. Can he go all the way, James Bullock? Oh! Sticks it away! 4 seconds, the clock is still counting. The clock is still counting. That's the ball game.
All-time legend Phil Smythe still has a chuckle about those closing seconds.
Yeah, I think the team, and specifically myself, I remember I made the turnover that let them win by a point. So, yeah, we know we have to win these games if we're going to make it to the playoffs and win. So they're all important games. I think it's an indication the South Melbourne-Brisbane game, you just can't take anyone lightly.
But an expected Capacity House can't visualise Smythe making the same blue twice, and it will be up to the new-look Falcons to find the formula that will outplay the Cannons. Their form last week against Hobart was outstanding, with Everett, Johnston, Kruger, Harvey, Steele and Bullock all contributing to the 2-point win. Everett was sensational.
Into Everett, dunk, thank you!
He will have to maintain that brilliance to topple McGeechan, Emery, Atkinson and Smythe, who have started the season with 2 wins from as many matches.
Yellow ribbons lined the streets outside 19-year-old Terry Olsen's Toronto home.
Seeing my parents, it was great. Walking up, giving them all a cuddle. It was a great feeling. It was just unexplainable.
Terry's best mate Robbie Brady recently returned from duty on the supply ship Success. They shared their experiences over a beer.
He probably had a little bit harder than me because I was on a replenishment ship. They were easier.
Terry is a naval engineer with the Brisbane. It was closer to the action when war started.
When it first started, I'd just come off watch at midnight and I had 6 hours off, so I thought, well, I better get some sleep in, so I went to my bed and then I was laying there with my Walkman on listening to some music. Next thing you know, the action alarm was sounded, and when the action alarm was sounded, we knew there and then that it had actually started. But before that, we were told that the Americans were planning on an airstrike on the actual Kuwait, and we weren't quite sure what time, so everyone was told to buckle down.
Terry's parents were dockside in Sydney this morning to meet him. And what's it like to have him home?
Oh, tremendous. I just want to argue.
These 2 men will be among the youngest returned servicemen to march on Anzac Day. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The earth shook at around 8 this morning our time, shattering city buildings and rocking country villages. Worst hit was the port of Port Eliman, but the nation's capital San Jose also suffered severe damage. Widespread panic broke out on city streets, with some dropping to the ground to pray. The quake knocked out electricity and telephone lines, and it was followed by 3 strong aftershocks. Costa Rican President Calderon has asked US President George Bush and Mexico and Venezuela for urgent aid for earthquake victims. It's the second major quake to hit Costa Rica in 4 months. The last was in December and measured 5.6 on the Richter scale.